Hi, and a warm welcome to this afternoon's event. This is our digital installation as part of the 5th Picture Gallery Composer Residency here at Royal Holloway, University of London. My name is Nathan James Dearden. I'm a composer and the artist manager for this scheme. And this afternoon, I am joined by Dr. Laura McCulloch, who is the art curator here at the college and works as part of the scheme. And also Dr. Tom Parkinson, who has been our lead tutor, who is lecturer in digital composition here at Royal Holloway as well. So welcome both. Hi. I just thought I'd first start asking a question just as to frame this project and introduce the people that will be watching this event. So Laura, how important is this sort of project and collaboration for your work in the arts collection?
Oh, so important. When we kind of cooked this up 5 years ago, I was so excited about it, and I've never stopped being excited about it, because I think what it brings to the art collections is new voices. And there's an audio quality that otherwise people coming to see the collections in the Picture Gallery wouldn't be able to experience that in the same way. I mean, the pictures have been hanging there for about 150 years in the same conversation. So then to have the music come in makes people make connections with them in completely different ways. And the pictures make connections with each other in completely different ways. And I just think it's really accessible. You could be any age and enjoy the music and the chance to see the pictures in a different way. And we recently started doing audio tours and audio description tours in the Picture Gallery. But the music, there's something about art and music that goes together. And I think that brings something really special to the collections.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful, because one of the main reasons that we started chatting in my role as performance manager at the Department of Music was that we were in there a lot as a department in the Picture Gallery and around the amazing paintings and the collection. And there was little in the way of actually collaborating directly with what was around us and the space itself. So I think it's been fantastic over these 5 years, allowing a lovely creative space for composers to be able to respond to the collection and that level of collaboration that they might not have elsewhere.
We share that space, like music and the art share the space. But I think prior to this, there hadn't been, for a very long time, a real collaboration between the art and the music. There hadn't been a way to like come together in that shared space. And I think that's allowed it. You know, we have a great relationship with music, whereas we knew each other before, but we hadn't worked together. It's different. So I think it's going to open lots of doors.
Yeah. And that level of collaboration, I mean, Tom, as a composer who works all across the world and collaborates with amazing organizations and amazing artists, how important is that collaboration with art and other art forms for you?
It's really important. Like you say, it's kind of the core of what I do as a composer. But it's fairly rare that I get to compose with what you might call kind of fixed media or not time-based stuff. And it's a really wonderful opportunity, I think. And I wish I could do more of it, because obviously if you're collaborating with on a film, for example, or a show, you're constantly having to negotiate what's happening in time. But when you're working with a painting or with a kind of a sculpture, as a composer, everything about time is up to you, and you can therefore kind of collaborate with and interact with what it is that you're seeing in an entirely different way than you can when you're working with a film. And and obviously time is a huge aspect of what we kind of work with as composers, and that allows us to investigate things like kind of formal elements of music or whatever in ways that are not available in more normal kinds of collaboration.
Mm. In terms of the composers that we have this year, I mean, every year, for those who don't know, the Picture Gallery Composer in Residency has a sort of in-house ensemble or a sort of theme or brief every year. And this year, in the times that we're living in, we thought we would take advantage of creating digital installations. So bringing the art collection and the Picture Gallery to you at home. And Tom, in terms of the composers that we have at Royal Holloway, how varied are these responses?
Hugely varied, happily. I would have loved to have seen what they would do with in an acoustic context as well, these composers, because they're very capable of doing that. But yeah, within this, a huge variety. We've got some abstract things and some quite kind of concrete pieces of music, and things that are sort of generically inspired, and I don't mean generically in but like sort of identifiable, in what they're doing stylistically, and others that are more abstract. How you'd like to describe it. And for me, it's a real pleasure because most of the composers, there's a couple of exceptions, but most of them I've taught before, so I'm familiar with them primarily through their assignments and whatnot. So it's great to be able to see how they're taking the stuff that we've done in classes, for example, and using it in a more expressive sense where they're not having to worry about what their marks, but are just being creative with it. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I some of the conversations that we had starting out this project, and actually that happen every year for this scheme, how composers take a physical piece of work, an artifact or a piece of art that's hanging on a wall, and how do they respond to that? And I think it's been fascinating to see how each of the composers have differently done that, whether that's looking at the paint strokes and the brush paint on the canvas, or whether that's taking the architecture of the space and running with ideas on acoustic levels. I think the responses that we have had this year are really varied, like you've said, and yeah, I can't wait to hear them all.
Absolutely, and it says a lot about it says a lot about
sorry,
who. Don't worry. It says a lot about who they are as artists, that they are the variety of the approaches that they've got. So, as you say, some of them are approaching it conceptually, and some of them are approaching it in a more narrative kind of sense and a kind of programmatic sense. And it's interesting to see kind of who's doing what and how that ties in with the rest of the music that they are making.
So I'm really excited about the variety of the objects that they've chosen. For the first time, we've got someone doing a sculpture, Erina, and she's a bit of a pet love of mine. I love her story. So I'm going to be really excited to hear the musical response to her. And then we've got one duplication. I think, is that the first duplication we've ever had with the Man Proposes, God Disposes? So that's going to be interesting because they're going to have completely different responses. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And then people have chosen things that they haven't chosen before, not necessarily the big hitters. So that's going to be really interesting. And it's one of the reasons I really like this scheme, because they don't always choose the big hitters. So it really draws the visitor's attention to some other pictures that are really worthy of being looked at and engaged with. And perhaps I think the music is a really good way to get them to do that. And then we've got one person who's looking at the space as a whole. And that in itself is amazing, because it is a really awesome space. When you go in, if you've never been in before, it's so huge and lofty. You really get a sense, okay, I'm in this quite unique atmosphere and unique space. So to see how someone deals with that musically and that feeling that you get when you come in, that's going to be really great as well.
Great. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Laura. For the rest of this event, we're going to welcome our composers to chat to us about their work, and then we're going to hear the world premiere of these digital installations. So stick around, and thank you once again, Laura and Tom.
Thank you.
Hi, we're now joined by another of our Picture Gallery Composer in Residence composers in our fifth cohort, Patrick Deely, who is a final year composer at the Department of Music. So, hi Patrick, could you just tell us about the painting, actually, or the inspiration, your starting point for this project, and why you chose that, and what the name of the piece ends up being?
Hi there. I chose to write a piece called Summer Haze over Kynance Cove. And for me, I took inspiration from John Brett's Carthaven Cliffs. And I've always been drawn to it when I'm in the picture gallery. It's one of my absolute favourite pieces in the picture gallery for the colour choice, the calmness and the stillness of the water, and the warmness as well of the colour palette. It's a very warm, summery image that you get. You just feel like you want to be there. And the particular part that I most inspired by is the haze on the actual painting as well, that gives it a sense of distance, and it really sort of sets the cliffs back over Kynance Cove, and that's why I took that particular title. And one final thing as well is the metallic shimmer that's used on the rocks. It's really quite striking, really, really incredible in real life to see.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that piece too. And it's our only really pre-Raphaelite piece. Like, it's the only one that has those kind of really jewel-like colours. So I think it does stand out. It's quite small, but I think it really packs a punch despite how small it is. So I'm really pleased you've chosen it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really gorgeous as well that you've picked up on the metallic nature of it, or the color within it, and that was the inspiration as opposed to the narrative behind the piece. So I'm really excited to hear what you've done with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the original artist John Brett would go every summer to that part of England, and he'd hire a boat often to paint. So it's something it was a real rhythm for him. Every summer he would go and then do sketches and all paint directly, as he did with that painting. And then in the winter months, he'd be back in rather colder London. But I think that connection to summer was something that is really imbued in it for him as well. Not just because of where it was, but because he went there every year. So, yeah, no, good choice. Patrick, can you tell me, it sounds like you were really drawn to that picture, so it was maybe quite an easy choice. And having made that choice, how did you then kind of respond to that musically? How did you get from the physical object to the music? And what was your process? How did the process develop as you were working?
Yeah, there are a few key bits that I wanted to pick out. For example, the depth and the distance to the cove, that I wanted to create a real sense of space. So I've used a lot of reverb and a lot of ambience to create a space and set the piece back. It's filling a space. There's also the tranquility of this, the sort of calmness and nostalgic almost feeling of being in these fields looking over the cove. That's the kind of feeling of also being up and above the clouds as well. And lastly, also the reflections in the water, most notably the reflection from the boat. You can see a wonderful few lines of white colour from the sails, and that sort of undulating waves sound is something that you'll hear particularly in the piano, as how I've responded to the water.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous, actually.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, that's okay. It's okay. I've obviously been fortunate enough to hear the music, and I loved how you've reflected the vibrancy in the painting through actually something that sounds almost like 18 synth elements, and that sort of excitement and the bubbling and the gestures that you have throughout the music, I think has really captured it in a really imaginative and different way than I would have anticipated. So yeah, I'm looking forward to everybody hearing that. And based on what I've already heard, can you maybe tell us a little more about the final musical product, your response, and if there's anything we should be listening out for?
Yeah, I started off, I'm very fortunate to have a few synthesizers which I've been using to create this project. And I've created all the sounds from scratch, making all different sound design. And it was an opportunity for me to actually explore creating new sounds and new harmonics and things like that. So it opens with some warm chords on a synth pad, and you'll hear that it's very slow. It's free time as well, so there's no strictness to it. It's just a very calm opening, and then what follows is much more expressive. The melodies and the harmonies are in fact actually inspired by John Ireland, in particular his piano piece "Summer Evening," and for me it sounds so similar in its sound world to what we're seeing in this. And the John Ireland English Impressionism sound is part of what I've wanted to capture, especially in the piano. And then towards the end, there's a short section that's sort of aiming to be above the clouds. You hear sort of these rotations in chords in the strings, which is very slow and very bright as well. And then finally, there's a very calm drone created on the Moog synthesizer, which has a spring reverb as well, which is a very metallic sound. So it will sound very digital, but real sense of space.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. Can't wait to hear it.
Thank you.
I really like that you mentioned about Impressionism, because the Pre-Raphaelites were kind of, in a way, the English Impressionists. It was just their way of seeing was different. They were trying to put everything in meticulous detail. But nevertheless, they were trying to capture the moment, and they were painting completely outdoors often, which is exactly the same as the French Impressionists. So, I haven't heard it yet. I cannot wait to hear it now. I'm really curious to see how the summer comes over. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. So we're with one of our Picture Gallery Composer in Residence composers for 2020-21, our fifth cohort, Kate Chan. Hi, Kate. Thanks for joining us. Could you just introduce yourself and tell us the name of your musical response for this residency?
Hi, guys. So I'm Kate. I'm a final year of music student in Royal Holloway. And my piece is called If Time Stops for One Moment.
Yeah.
And so I'm really intrigued about your music. Now I've heard your title. So which painting inspired it? And what made you choose that painting?
So my inspiration for my music is the painting about the polar bear and mankind. And it's called Man Proposes, God Disposes, by the painter Edwin Landseer. So obviously, it's one of the most popular, discussed painter among Royal Holloway, like throughout the years. So I'm quite interested in the original story behind the painting. So basically, it's about how human facing the cruelty of nature and then the harsh life of the animals living in the Arctic, and also about the competition of resources. Also, I appreciate the colors and tones of the painting. Like you can see some icy blue, like diamond green, and some warm, mellow yellow tone together. And then I think it's a really nice complement of the color in the painting.
That's really interesting that you've taken the color and the brushstroke of the painting more so than maybe the narrative behind it. I'm wondering then, from that starting point of the Landseer, was there a process that you created from that starting point and that inspiration to creating your music?
Yeah. Firstly, I can relate to where the painting is put in. It's in the gallery, a picture gallery, which is a very spacious area. And I think the gallery has also witnessed many happened of the historical events throughout, maybe like 100 years. So it's just really giving me that vintage and reminiscent feeling. So I want to create something that with heavy reverbs and something like church space, just to resonate with the space in the gallery. On the musical level, in relate to the painting, I think the eyes at the background really capture my attention because the painting obviously is showing such a cuisine, which is underlining the competition of resources between men and animals and what the global warming will bring us eventually. So I tried to create a really cold and empty atmosphere in my music. And for the instrumentation, I think it would be really interesting to use like extended techniques of strings, like pseudotestal and using like harmonics with piano and vocals, just to create that kind of very lonely vibe.
Otherworldly.
Yeah. For the vocals, I want to point out that it acts like a narrative or like a storyteller to bring the listeners to the painting, but it's also like a representation of mankind. Yeah.
Wow.
I really like the fact that you are thinking about that ice in the background, because I think Landseer really deliberately, he produces it in that very long, narrow format to make you get that sense of the ice going on and on and on. That reverberation, which is you know seem to have picked up musically as well, and that idea of isolation and the viewer just kind of being surrounded by the ice, but that seems to have really struck you. So I'm really excited to hear how that comes out in your music.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell us? Oh no, it's good. I'm really excited. But can you tell us a little bit more about the final musical response itself? And then is there anything that we should particularly be listening out for when we're hearing it?
So at the last section of the song, I used like an open chord progression, so to give us like a hopeful future for both the mankind and animals. And that's kind of like my I put my expectation on this song, and I think like a good artwork should be evocative to the listeners, and I hope the listeners can use their own imaginations just to maybe fantasize the scene a bit, like just to imagine the polar bears are walking or roaring and then finding food, and at the same time you might hear like the sound of ice melting. So you're trying to merge music with the painting together and to create your own meanings from the painting. Yeah, eventually.
Yeah, I think that's the fascinating thing that you've done, Kate. You've taken a painting that is so beloved and known and spoken about and written about and studied, but you've recontextualized it. You've brought something that we're really familiar with, but then made it really topical for now. And I can't wait to hear what you've done with that musically.
Thank you.
Ooh.